Good evening, folks. Welcome to A Question of Meaning.
We've had an interesting couple of emails from a viewer who wanted to ask some questions about a few things. One, experience, and the other was morality. And we thought we'd tackle morality today, since we've talked about experience some, and but we really haven't talked about morality at all. So,
does it count if you have no morals? I mean, I don't particularly. I do philosophically, but in terms of
actual reality,
or
not
reality,
behavior.
In terms of behavior, I'm a very naughty boy. I tend to indulge my appetites.
Well, then you're an expert on lack of morality.
On immorality.
That's right.
Oh,
So you have a good basis.
So I do have something to contribute.
Absolutely.
It's like there was a question, there was a meaning of life website, and people wrote in, a New Zealander wrote in and said the meaning of life is you're born, you drink beer, you die. Sounds like a Zealander and a Kiwi. And but my favorite was actually from Asheville, North Carolina. And it was, at the very least, your life may serve as a warning to others.
But that's a service.
That's right.
You know, you do not want to go down this road.
Don't fall out of windows when you're 4 years old, or you may end up like Eduardo Wong.
Okay. We were just reading about a new documentary.
Don't let your child deal dope when he's 12 years old. It can give him a skewed outlook on life.
We just read about a documentary about William S. Burroughs, and his son died of horrible alcoholism before the father died. And
father was a lifelong, had problems with heroin.
Right, and all
sorts of...
Very
naughty drug.
Yeah, so he certainly wasn't a very good role model for his son.
His son wrote an article in Esquire that I read many years ago. It talked about, living in Colombia with the old man and his parents, and how the pot was growing between the rows of corn, and they were doing a lot of drugs and living an absolute hedonistic existence. And one night at a big drunken party, someone bet Burroughs Sr. that he couldn't shoot an apple off his wife's head. And so he took the bet. First shot hit her right between the eyes, just killed her dead. He loved her. Terrible blow.
Well,
and
one thing
that... said, is there a psychiatrist in the house? It was like,
sorry, I stepped in your punchline.
Anyway, so,
can I just make a comment about that?
Because it's
on one of my favorite socio-political commentary topics. What I learned from that article about William S. Burroughs, I had always thought of him as a writer exclusively. And what I learned today was that he was an heir to the Burroughs adding machine fortune.
Business machines, yeah.
And that he said that it was the death of his wife was the reason he became a writer, that he wasn't a writer at that time. He was leading a completely hedonistic life fueled by inherited wealth. And
now, wait a minute. This has to be after Naked Lunch. This isn't. This.
Oh well, that's what the
this is after Naked Lunch. I guarantee you, he had a heroin problem.
Well, you read the article again. It said Burroughs. It quoted Burroughs in the documentary saying the death of his wife.
You mean to get up and go Google it?
No. Anyway, well, so maybe we should just get on to our topic of morality.
Let's get on to our topic, morality.
What this person emailed us about was he'd heard us talk about our definition of love, which is the experience of unconditional acceptance of what is. And he had a lot of trouble understanding how that could mean moral behavior. That he thought that if we loved somebody who we saw dying in the gutter, that if you accepted them, you could just walk on by.
I fully accept that you're dying in the gutter. Have a nice day.
That's right.
And I love you because I accept that you're lying in the gutter dying.
But I don't have to do anything about it. And that's what he had.
That's a wonderful interpretation.
Well, he really...
That was actually very interesting.
Yeah, so he was, confused about how we could interpret that as a loving... as love, if it meant you didn't do anything.
Faith without works for you Christians out there.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. So what I was going to write him back, but we're so busy lately. I really don't have time for kind of like intellectual exchanges and intellectual chess games. I was going to write back. You're putting the cart before the horse. Our definition. What drives you to really sincerely do loving things for people is you're in a state of love. You do good things for people because there's something in you compelling you to do that. And if it's praying loudly in the marketplace or giving ostentatious gifts at the altar, as Jesus said, those people have their reward in full. They're hypocrites. They're doing it for self-gratification publicly. But any action that, here's what I think in a nutshell.
Yeah.
I think that morality, when you're in the state of love, when you're experiencing, and here's the rub. We've said this many times, the experience of unconditional acceptance of what is. You know what is? What is what really is. What is nothing less than the absolute truth. Nobody knows that. Unconditional acceptance of that, you can't accept something that you don't know, you don't see, you don't perceive, you don't recognize. You can't accept what's behind this curtain back here because it could be your worst nightmare that you've never even faced consciously, and you're not going to be able to accept it. You have to perceive to accept. And unconditional acceptance requires unconditional perception, unconditional knowledge of absolute truth. That's why we think God is love. It's an absolute state that's beyond our even wildest imaginings at our level of consciousness. However, we're saying, and he got really confused about this too, the writer, that we were saying that he thought we were saying Hitler and Mother Teresa were basically the same in terms of morality, but I'm jumping into morality right now.
So let me just kind of maybe take what you're saying, which is, okay, I mentioned walking by the person that's lying in the gutter. So how does our definition of love affect what my actions might be to that person lying in the gutter? Well, in my prior life, earlier years, before I really started experiencing love in any way connected with how we define love now, I was a very selfish person. I was a very judgmental person. And if I saw someone lying in the gutter, I thought maybe they deserved to lie in the gutter. Maybe they'd made some really bad choices in their life. Maybe they were just a bad and wrong and evil person that, just couldn't be bothered to hold a job. And they were so bad that they drank too much. And so why should I give some of my hard-earned money to them? Because they can't just be bothered to go out and get a job. I mean,
sound like a Republican.
Yeah, I mean, so I would have walked by that person, and I would have felt right for walking by that person because they didn't deserve my help.
Good for them. Kicking someone when they're down is great incentive for them to get on their feet.
Well, and we will get to that actually, because sometimes what we think is love isn't really love, as all the books on codependency have illustrated. But the point I'm making here is that how I would describe that thinking process that was very common in my mind in years past was I was not accepting that person the way they were. I had all sorts of ideas about how they should be, how they could be, how they would be if I had run their life. And so they were not okay with me the way they were, the way they are, and they didn't. So it was okay for me to walk by, and by accepting them, by having the experience of acceptance for who they are, which means their frailness as a human being. They're all of us are limited creatures who make mistakes and have trouble dealing with the complexities of life. And this is what they were capable of in life. Whatever that means, the details don't really matter. And I accept them that this is the best they can do in their life. And that, when I feel that, then all that judgment's gone, all that harsh, you should be better, there's something wrong with you, all that's gone. And then what's flowing out of me is a suffering human being, that I have plenty and this person has little, so I have some to share. And that's where my acceptance, this is the type of acceptance we're talking about, is not that it means I just don't want to do anything about it. It's that my acceptance has stilled all the judgment that blocked my doing anything about it in the past.
Yeah, the objective fact would support that anybody standing on a windy street corner or at a stoplight, holding a sign saying "Please help, need food," even if they're a crumb bum, if you will, which kind of the word that comes to the phrase that comes up to me, somebody that's just shiftless and
Right.
and avoids work like the plague, also me, I can relate to that, there's something wrong with that person. That's no way. Fat, drunk, and stupid and standing on a street corner with a sign begging for money is no way to go through life. And
It's at minimum a very hard life.
a very hard life, a very degrading.
Yeah.
Maybe they don't have any conscience or whatever arguments. Maybe they're con artists. Maybe they drive away in a Lexus. Maybe they make big bucks. Not. How many times have you heard that? You should see the cars they
A
drive
welfare
away in.
queen from Reagan's day, yeah.
They're paying a price. And it's
Right.
having compassion for them where they are. And compassion is very much an aspect of love. It's seeing the extenuating circumstances. I mean, part of me, I'm just as animalistic and conservative. That's what flight fight is. When you're afraid of something, you hate it. You see somebody like Eduardo Wong not getting the death penalty, there was a part of me that was disappointed. And I am absolutely philosophically opposed to the death penalty. I'm philosophically opposed to the way we treat prisoners in this country. It's beastly. It's akin, if we survive, to the way we treated mental patients at the turn of the 20th century, at the dawn of the 20th century. It's gross misunderstanding that of the simple fact that we argue heavily in our new book, that all crime, from littering to murder, proceeds from a state of insanity, the state of confusing mind-generated reality. The bank has the money. That's where the money is, Murph the Surf, I believe, said. So I'm going to go and take it because I can get away with it, and I'm not willing to do the stuff that other people do to get income. So I'm just going to go steal it. Mm-hmm. The mind does the darndest things. This guy had some bad, Eduardo Wong. I don't want to get into all the stuff. I mean, as I was reading about the trial, I was kind of offended at the excuses, if you will, but that they came up with. It's like make marijuana legal for medical reasons. Just baloney. Make it legal because it's none of your damn business what kind of intoxicant an American chooses to use. If you ever used anything, you can get fired, and you can be a homeless person standing out in the cold with a sign saying, "Please help." There's consequences. But you don't have any right, especially when you allow people to die by the hundreds of thousands peddling your damn tobacco products and your booze that causes slaughter on the highway and wrecked homes and wrecked lives. That's legal. Why? Because you can be an idiot. You can be an unconscious cog in their machinery and drink that stuff while it comes out your butt because you'll be hungover, but you'll be at work. You'll be back at the treadmill the next morning. And that's all that counts. Unless you really get out of hand. So there's always extenuating circumstances. And where am I going with this?
Well, you were talking about how you as opposed to the death penalty as part of you was offended at the defense attorney's presentation of extenuating circumstances to excuse Eduardo Wong's behavior. But I
was offended at him getting off with life in prison, life in a zoo, life in an animal cage. I thought that part of me was rooting for the death penalty.
Mm-hmm. That's how deep it goes.
Because you're afraid. You're afraid of people like that, and what you fear is what you hate. And one thing going for everybody. Well, go ahead.
Well, but this is why we talk about free will, and we are so opposed, so want to kill the concept of free will, because that underlies.
Katie and I want to kill
it. This underlies Arthur's desire. As intellectually convinced as Arthur is, and I am, that free will doesn't exist, it's still because it was so thoroughly programmed into our minds when we were babies by our culture that it's still operating under there. And so we think that Eduardo Wong freely chose to murder that policeman. And that he freely chose all his actions, and because he freely chose to do wrong, he is wrong. Because he freely chose to do bad things, immoral things, he is a bad person and immoral to his core. And there is no redeeming features about him, no reasons, no extenuating circumstances to excuse these things, because it's just who he is. He's bad, he's wrong, he's evil. And this all comes down to free will. And that's, for me, what love is about. Love is about seeing that nobody is bad to the core. Nobody is evil. That all of us are, you know what's really true is that underneath all of us is this core of love.
That's right, including Hitler.
That's
Hitler
right.
expressed love the best way he could. Admittedly, kind of not exactly stellar, his ability to express. But it was there. That's the core. That's the core behind in everything. It's
and
a
that's
question of meaning, Kat. It's in the
That's right.
It's in the molecules of
that make up that camera,
that's
and
right.
the television you're watching.
Technology. It's what underlies everything.
And that's
to our
when
theory.
you have the experience of unconditional acceptance of something. When you love it, you are seeing through that. The illusion,
Mm-hmm.
right? The act that person has built up to survive in life, and you're seeing through underneath to that core person inside. Maybe you could see it this way: you're seeing to that baby that once, that was born and had, all the just brimming over with love, and that babies are the reason we love to see babies, because they're just founts of love, but for somehow that baby was twisted and distorted in the programming process of life to where that baby grew up thinking that to survive, it had to turn to a life of crime or it had to turn to a life of murder, because that was the best way for it to survive. But that doesn't mean that that baby isn't still in there somewhere wanting love. And that's what being love is seeing inside is...
Sounds so bleeding heart liberal, doesn't it, folks? Because it's easier. Just if a gorilla causes a problem, you just take a stick and beat on it.
Bam.
Until you. That's what the appeal of Rush Limbaugh.
That's right.
Simple answers for simple minds. No thinking required. We don't do nuance. To quote the giggling murderer who was your president for 8 years. Because it's one other. I mean, I'm really disgusted. I think the Democrats are bought and sold, but I think it's one of the reasons it's hard for the left, for progressives, to get their message out, because it's complex. Mm-hmm. When you start crunching the numbers, that's why we say there's no free will. And I'm not sure we really want to get into this heavily, because
I just mentioned it.
We have basically. The way we put it in our new book, We Are All Innocent by Reason of Insanity, which we hope to get published soon, our actions are absolutely predetermined by the existent psychological and physiological configuration, the way we are right now, blood pressure, temperature in the room, the breeze that crosses my face, interacting with external stimuli. If we could crunch all the variables, we would predict absolutely what a person's going to do. Point is, we can't crunch all those numbers, or we're not up to that level yet. But you look at a stream. You look at a stream burbling over rocks and all the complexities of the various currents and motions and dynamics of that stream at one particular spot. There's nothing arbitrary going on there. Every drop is predetermined from when it was melted snow above the timberline and comes down. Everything does what it's bound to do. There's no free will in a stream. There's no free will in a wild animal. It does what it needs to do to survive. And I know this is offensive. I find it offensive. Well, we ain't got no free will neither. Human beings do what they do. There's a psychological devil on one shoulder and a psychological angel on the other. And whichever one has the upper hand, that's the way we're going to jump. That's the way we're going to react. Those are the words we're going to choose. Those are the thoughts we're having that, say, I'm not going back to jail. This trooper stopped me. He's looking for trouble. He's going to send me back to prison where I tried to escape and got shot in the ass. I'm not going back. And the beast comes forward and starts shooting. First-degree murder is premeditated. If you want to call a split-second impulse to eliminate the problem, if you want to call that premeditated, well, lots a lot.
Yeah, see our crime show. I think we probably talked about some of the insanity in some of these judgments in our criminal justice system. But so back to love and morality. Because one of the things that our correspondent mentioned, because I was really kind of unclear about what he thought. He kind of masked his thoughts pretty well. And he mentioned that, in traditional societies, traditional theology is the way he put it, that morality was kind of an outside system. And, that's where, say, Christianity had this God imposes a morality on us. There it is. And, came out of the Judaic tradition of the Ten Commandments, chiseled into stone. This is how to behave.
Behavior, you're going to get fire and brimstone.
And this is actually what the Ten Commandments are. These are the ways not to behave. As long as you don't do these 10 things, then I guess everything's going to be okay. And
thinking about man on dog. I guess
no.
Well, see, there you go.
Yeah, God wasn't very,
It's kind of a curious form of pleasure. But
we need to have the Ten Commandments updated. We need amendments to the Ten Commandments.
We Americans can relate to that. Let's get some.
So I mean, and obviously that's why our world looks so confusing and chaotic, is because for centuries all societies around the world pretty much had these external moral traditions, that they believe were imposed by a higher authority.
Like reincarnation in the East. If your good deeds, you either accumulated good karma, which meant you could go up the scale of evolution of consciousness, or bad karma, which would you come back as a frog being swallowed by a snake.
That's right. So the concept of hell was a very effective policer of behavior.
Punishment reward system.
That's right. People were only willing to go so far because the threat of hell kept them in line. So when all of these outside constraints started crumbling 100 or so years ago, when people started questioning the authority of religions and questioning the existence of God and saying, well, if we don't believe in God, if we don't believe in your religious authority, then why should we believe in your moral authority?
There you go. Education, mass education, and leisure time comparatively to.
Right. So, where does morality come from then? And so that's why our society looks, for the last 100 years, has looked frightening to a lot of people, because where do we get our morality from? It's all relative. Is that what, that's what has certainly been in place, is that morality is relative. And it's just what you like. It's everybody kind of makes up their own morality. So there's the morality of a gang, which they do. They have their own morality. But is that real morality?
Well, why don't we kick it back to, because I think we went way off the basic, which is not unknown on this show. The idea of our friend who wrote in said...
But this is one thing he was talking about.
I understand, but I'm just saying the basic question is, you're saying, he said that what we're saying is love is acceptance. And that's what we're saying, the experience of acceptance of what is. It's always conditional for human beings, but give me a break. Accepting the reality as manifest without railing against it or running from it, fighting it or flighting it. That's not bad. I mean, as much as we can do. It's what happens when we fall in love, in romantic love. For a change, or once in a blue moon, you see something you actually like in reality that you're not flighting or fighting from, or whatever. You find extraordinarily acceptable, the thunderbolt, or whatever. I just met a girl named Maria. And that's an experience of accepting what is in front of you, what you're looking at. So his issue was that accepting, the experience of acceptance, that's not what love is. Love is doing. Love is active. Love is, putting, faith without works again. And what I was going to write is, you're putting the cart before the horse. You don't do good deeds if you don't have the experience of love. And That's kind of a complex issue, and I think that's why I went off the sidetrack
Yeah.
by talking about, I mean, the Good Samaritan, story. I don't want to get biblical, but if you help somebody, you help a stranger, like speaking of kicking someone when they're down, we were in downtown Asheville, and there was a young musician
Right.
playing some really nifty songs, James Taylor and whoever, and had a very, very nice voice,
He did.
played really decent guitar, and I gave him $1. But even as I did it, I was kind of troubled. It's like, what? Because I've busked in San Francisco for a couple of summers on the street. Had a great time. Never mind the statement it was making about myself. I wanted to say to him later, I thought, what the hell are you doing sitting on the sidewalk? There are clubs. I've done it. You can go into a club and talk them into letting you play for tips inside where it's warm, where you don't have to destroy your voice by projecting over cars. What statement are you making about yourself? What lack of self-worth are you telegraphing, or are you in fact experiencing? This is the best you think you can do. And so it's not necessarily kicking someone when they're down, but it's not enabling them either. But I think that, to me, it requires not just walking by and, what a loser, but maybe if you're not going to give $1, then why don't you talk like that? Mm-hmm. Why don't you say, hey, man, why aren't you in a club? What are you doing out here on the sidewalk, like a crumb bum?
Right. Well, because then I think the question you're asking is, so how do
hard.
you define what loving behavior is?
That's right. That's right. Because enabling is like, Alcoholics Anonymous, they say you want to help a drunk, somebody who's actively drinking, buy them a bottle.
That's right.
Encourage them to slam onto the concrete.
And that
Encourage them
sure
to hit
doesn't look
bottom.
loving at the time. Most people would say, "Are you kidding?"
It's called tough love. It's also
Right.
what are those encounter things? What do they call them? Interventions.
Right.
When
That's
your
right.
friends get together and say, you know what, you got a real problem with drugs, or you got a real problem with alcohol, and this hurts us. This is scary for us to say this.
Right. Because you
But
may
you're-
hate us.
Yeah. But you're acting like a self-destructive dork, and maybe you should get off it because we care about you. That's an act of love. It's called tough love.
When I first met Arthur, one of the things he taught me, one of the first things Arthur taught me, and I just loved him for it, was when you love somebody, you tell them they have spinach in their teeth. You tell them their fly is unzipped before they're going out on a date. And the way I had been raised was you don't tell people those things because that might be rude. I mean, it was once you hear somebody say that, you go, of course. How could not telling someone they have spinach in their teeth be anything but the caring, loving thing to do? But the way I had been raised in this Midwestern, uptight way, that seemed so intrusive and rude, and I would never have done that. But what an unloving thing that was, not to tell people about things that I saw. And so we have all sorts of weird and crazy ideas.
Because there can be
of what love
consequences,
is.
like my friend Gamble, rest his soul, who was at a cocktail party in Coconut Grove and saw this woman, this very attractive woman he was talking to with this black velvet suit on, and there was one of her, a blonde hair was just hanging on her shoulder. And while he was talking to her, he just very gallantly reached over and just plucked it off and just almost pulled her head off because it was attached to the side of her neck.
Oh.
And it just came out from under her hair. So there are consequences. Maybe it doesn't go down so well. So it's fear. There's a lot
there's
of
fear,
that.
sure.
Because we're in a culture that the bottom line rule, I'm sorry I interrupted you, was like, you buy my act and I'll buy yours.
Right.
So that means we don't mention spinach or unzip.
Well, as a matter of fact, we were watching Bill Maher the other night, and he had Mike Huckabee on, the ex-governor of Arkansas, who, famously was fat and lost the weight to run for president because we can't have a fat
See
president.
the guy that ate at Subways? No, that was somebody.
No. And he talked about how in his family, love was equated with food. That if he was a good boy, he would get a bowl of ice cream. If
Anybody
he was a
relate to
bad
that?
boy, he wouldn't get the ice cream. So, I've seen that, with our pets. We've actually not been doing that with Question and Meaning Cat. Because our prior cat, we expressed love through food, and she ballooned out to be, obese, which hurt her. And so there was an easiness I also could see in expressing love through food rather than spending time with her, rather than doing the things that might have been a little bit harder. It was much easier just to say, "Oh, kitty, you want a treat?"
Keep your voice down.
and
Or locked into a
right. So,
midday
but
treat
people,
schedule.
but people, and though that are really, I imagine Mike Huckabee's mother was completely unaware. She thought she was loving him. She thought this was the right way to express love, because maybe that's the way she'd been taught to express love.
Pancakes
She
coming
wasn't.
right up.
That's right. She wasn't wrong. This was,
My parents say the same thing.
but that's how she was programmed, and so that's how Mike Huckabee was programmed. And it was very hard to break that programming. But the point is, she thought she was loving him by overfeeding him, by rewarding him with food.
Well, let's take that out to our society. We live in a country of fatties. I'm a fatty. I'm obese.
Yeah.
And what does that mean? It's like, because I've done a lot of drugs, I've done alcohol, but there's something about food that can almost have this, and well, not really the same effect. It's like good LSD.
But it makes you feel good.
But it soothes. It's like what they used to say in AA was like it medicates your emotions.
Definitely does.
It's like there's nothing like when you feel antsy or a little bit down in a tub of ice cream or a stack of food on your plate. Well, just get those trans fats.
Fat and sugar is definitely.
Fat and sugar.
Well, why do you think we all overeat during the holidays? It's because it's the darkest time of year. It's a way of soothing this animal fear that the light's going away and won't come back.
Not to mention being bombarded by relatives.
And advertising. But there really is it's a deep primal need to be reassured at this time of year.
Just to feel better.
Right.
And we're a wealthy country. We have access to it. Supersize that. Why not? I'll have the...
So when we were talking about this, I remembered M. Scott Peck's book, The Road Less Traveled. And his definition of love was the extension of yourself for the spiritual growth of another person, which I think our correspondent would think that was a very good definition of love. I think that this is kind of more in line with what he thinks love would be. And I remember pondering that definition when I realized that for me this seemed a definition of what you did when you felt love, but it really didn't get to what love is, which is, for me, love is an experience. Love is how you feel when you are encountering something that you love.
Dare we say being?
Right.
You're being in love.
Right.
And you know what? We're being in love to the maximum that we're capable of right now. Mm-hmm. Our existing psychological, physiological state interacting with external stimuli, this is the best we can do. I love you. It ain't much, folks, but it's the best I can do right now. And I think that's what we can all say about each other. And out of that being, whatever conditional, absolutely inevitable conditional state of love we find ourselves in, that determines our actions. So that determines the doing. The being determines the doing, but this person seems to think that love is doing. It's not.
Right. There's no being.
The being is everything. You don't do if you don't be, you don't do.
Well, so this is where I was trying to get when I was talking about the traditional morality, because he also mentioned that, and so we always thought, well, people were moral because they were trained to be moral, because they were taught to be moral, because they follow these external rules. So we're in a time when those external rules have been pretty much blown up, and most people don't believe in them anymore. So where does morality come from? And that's what I was trying to get to, and you kind of led up to that, was that we're saying that morality, an ethical life, follows from the experience of love. That when you experience love, you are going to behave in a moral and ethical manner. And the more experience of love, the more ethical your behavior will be. The more you'll see through these beliefs about love that we were kind of, giving people food is love. That not telling them about the spinach in their teeth is love. That the more you really accept someone, the more you really see what it is to be that person and have compassion for their flaws and limitations and frailties, the more moral you will be, the more ethical you will be in your life, the more you'll understand that you're not going to want to take advantage of other people and exploit other people. Because maybe also because I think when you experience love, you're starting to experience a profound connection to other people and realize that hurting them hurts me. And I don't want to hurt myself.
Well, that's very nice, because that's leading into the selfish aspect of love. I mean, oh, selfish, oh God, how horrible, what an evil thing. Maybe not. Maybe that person dumpster diving over there, that person lying in the gutter, takes the edge off our lives. I was thinking about the cholera epidemic that's going on in Haiti. I think we gave. I can't remember whether we gave or not when the earthquake happened. I think we did. But now it's like, oh, are they back for more? I'm talking about the way I think. I'm a really selfish person. My mind is really all about me and mine. Doesn't care about other people. And like in Haiti, there's a great Mad magazine, Snappy Answers to Old Cliches. Kids sitting at the table, and the mother saying, clean your plate. People in India are starving. And the kid looks up and says, name one. If you care so much, name one. So it's like that. We feel better when we give, and it's like the reward for giving is inherent in the action. If we really give freely, not for self-aggrandizement, but we give because it makes us feel good, in the church, out of church, whatever. There's a selfish aspect. There's a payoff to giving. There's a reward we get. There's something I'm trying to remember that's like that. But there's always a selfish.
I know what you mean.
Just more blessed to give than receive. Because if you're in need, if the recipient, sometimes it's really hard to. Well,
maybe because when you give,
not to feel.
When you give, you receive also. So you're the whole loop is happening. But when you're receiving, you're only getting one half of it.
Cool. That's definitely cool.
Yeah. I thought that's what you always meant.
I guess I did.
You did. You just
I'm
don't
getting
remember.
old. I don't remember stuff anymore.
That's what you got a younger wife for, is to remember for you. Actually, yeah.
Take Arthur's advice, kids. Marry someone younger than yourself, and you can.
That's right. It's a type of insurance.
Crank a little more longevity out of you. It's the Anarchist Coffee House.
Yeah, I love these people.
Come and learn bomb making.
No, come and learn about cooperative societies. Societies built on people working together, not in competition. That's what anarchists. That's these people's perspective.
Now, the Anarchist Cookbook, didn't they have?
Well,
some
that was
bomb
we just
making in
watched
that?
Bowling for Columbine last night. Yes, and the Anarchist Cookbook is has bomb making. I don't know what else is in there, but yeah. But I think you can be an anarchist and not be a bomb thrower. I do think it's possible.
That's one of the reasons I never went to Biltmore House, because I was afraid if I ever saw that place, I would definitely be into putting Molotov cocktails together if I saw how they really lived.
Well, I'll tell you what. We'll go when we're at Firestorm. We'll ask them if you can be an anarchist without throwing bombs.
All right.
That'll be one of our topics for the night.
Rodriguez, who's still cartoonist, but his stuff is it's all domesticated now. But he used to be really radical. It had one of my favorites was you're looking on top of the rooftops of these buildings in a city, and there are police marksmen on all the rooftops because there's a presidential motorcade going down on the streets below, all the crowds and everything. And there's this wild, long-haired radical extolling out of a copy of Das Kapital and just haranguing and inciting. And the cop on his rooftop has got his high-powered scoped rifle just drawing a bead on the candidate. Another one of those was a comment on the death penalty. Was a series of cartoons on the death penalty, on execution of a poor soul. There was the cell where the condemned man is in, and the warden is looking at his watch, and the guards are kind of looking up at the ceiling, whistling, and the minister's kind of standing there with his Bible, not knowing what to do. And the condemned man is holding up the execution because he's sitting on the toilet with his pants around his ankles, clutching a roll of toilet paper and staring ahead very intently.
Oh, God.
How's that grab you?
That's
Another
a lovely
favorite of that
image.
series was the condemned man was holding onto the bars and screaming when the guards are trying to pull him away. But he was, even in his horror, he's looking in extra horror at the priest who's reaching over and biting his wrist to make him turn loose.
Yes, the complicity of the ministers. But you know what it made me think? You were going to say, although you've told me about that cartoon before, but it had this image of the condemned person gets their last words, right? Well, what if your last words goes on for like a week? What if you're a filibustering senator, who just has...
The complete works of William
That's
Shakespeare.
Right. I mean,
Introduction. The essence of...
That's right. Until
you
you could,
a lot of time
until
doing
you
that.
could, so to speak, until your voice went out. I mean, has any?
Oh, you'd have to break. You'd have to. You couldn't keep people in the
Right.
in the
That's true.
viewing rooms. Some of those places. Somebody should do a coffee table book on those slaughterhouses, those human death chambers. I mean, talk about grotesque. The colors they use and the attempt. We saw one that had these kind of flocked backs where the witnesses sat. These bizarre chairs. I mean, we are all tainted
So right
by
when
that.
we're talking about morality,
Speaking of
interestingly enough, we get to this, from a completely. I read this book called "The Case for Socialism" recently, and there was a quote from Mark Twain about how we're taught to just have this horror of the age of terror right after the French Revolution. When he says 10,000 aristocrats were killed, and that may be an inflated number. And he said, but nobody ever talks about the larger age of terror that had gone on for hundreds of years when the aristocracy had exploited the peasantry of France and just stole money from them and left them in just horrible poverty. And the hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people who had died in that larger age of terror. No one talks about that.
Well, why don't they? Because this shows you the reign of terror that lasted 2 years, shows you what happens when the po folks rise up. Mm-hmm. And that's the lesson you need to learn. It's appropriate that aristocrats occupy the government.
But when we talk
Only
about
they-
morality, that's what I'm wanting to bring that in here is who's moral. I mean, I'm sure
rich.
we think they have gentlemanly manners, and they know how to to be moral in their the ministers would say they were the moral. Those people living in the Paris slums were immoral. They lived dirty,
Live like
ugly
dogs.
lives.
Yeah,
That's right. And yet, because we don't look at the larger picture of the real, the true human to human interaction that where morality was
Which
that.
brings us back to the same thing we have to say periodically on the show. We believe we're slaves to the powerful. A handful run the show, and this is a great imitation of a democracy, but in fact, it's a plutocracy effectively posing as a democracy. Democrats, Republicans, bought. They're prostitutes. They're bought by the powerful, installed by the powerful, and they do what they're told, overwhelmingly. There are maybe a handful of exceptions who have something like integrity. And it's the best we can do at this point in evolution. Mm-hmm. We may not make it, folks. Self-extinction is facing the human race. I mean, it's staring us in the face. Staring in the face the entire human race. What a disgrace. No, it's not a disgrace. It's inevitable. Mm-hmm. Maybe we just didn't make it this time.
We
just
weren't
didn't
smart
have enough smarts or willingness to confront the hard issue. Maybe we were unwilling to tell each other we had spinach in our teeth and that our flies are unzipped and our thingy is dangling out or exposed.
Right.
Maybe, and that's what this show is about. This is our feeble attempt on URTV. Thank you, URTV, for the opportunity to, say, hey, maybe we should start questioning some of this stuff. Maybe life is not about being born, drinking beer, and dying.
That's right.
Maybe there's a little something more than reproducing yourself and sending your kids to college to learn some trade to keep the whole thing going, the machinery going as we as we ever accelerate toward the cliff edge. Maybe there's more to life than buying and selling and reproducing yourself. 3 square meals and 1 tubular bowel movement a day will see thee through the pearly gates. Oh, that's right. You can go be with Jesus for eternity. Maybe there's more to it. So anyway, what I said in the last show, where we talked about talking about love this time, is my gut feeling right at the end of that show when you mentioned it was that if you're experiencing love to a sufficient extent, your morality, your ethics are impeccable. At that moment, if you're experiencing, things change. You may have the demon of lust or the demon of greed or the demon of respectability can grab you and tear you and cause you to do unspeakable things. But at the moment that you are experiencing a sufficient degree of acceptance of what is before you right now, your morality and your ethics are impeccable. You will not do harm. You will not cheat. You will not lie. You will help. You'll be compelled to help. And to act, to extend yourself for the spiritual advancement of others. But that all the behavior comes out of love.
That's right.
This is what love is. It's being. Love is being. And out of loving being in love, you do from love.
Yes.
That's what we think.
Absolutely. I wanted to say first, 2 young women came up to us yesterday, and it was so nice. And so if you see us on the street, please come up to us. We really like it. It's fun. And just all you have to do is say hi, but we like that. Anyway.
Pay us a wad of cash to us. No, it's no obligation at all, folks.
No,
we don't take up collections. You come to Firestorm, you don't even have to act like you saw our show. It's one of the nice things about this event.
That's right.
You can just walk in and act like you just want a cup of very good coffee. They serve super duper coffee. It'll give you a whole new outlook on life.
And it's free. Our event is free.
Our event is free. The coffee is not free.
But you're supporting the Anarchists, which is nice.
So, now, do we need to say that? That's just going to turn a lot of people off. Well, I wouldn't go near there for $100.
Oh, hey, you know what? Maybe it would, like I said, we could question them a little bit. What is the meaning of anarchism? A lot of people don't know. So
and we were
could
never,
be an opportunity.
And we'll never be invited to Firestorm again.
We certainly weren't taught much about anarchists in school. Probably the only thing that most people ever heard, if they heard anything, was that an anarchist killed a president. Can you tell us which one?
John Zogals. No?
No, I was saying which president.
Oh, which president? Do you know who killed him?
No, I was impressed. I was impressed by that. Like,
McKinley?
Yes.
McKinley hollered, McKinley squalled. God said, Docs said, McKinley, I can't find the ball. You're bound to die. You're bound to die.
Wow. Well,
what a heavy bluegrass song that is.
I'll say.
Bill Monroe.
Well, I thought about this when I was talking before, and it's sort of been on my mind. So here's a little. Can we go into the confessional? Can I confess a crime against humanity that I committed years and years ago?
Oh, is this the one I'm thinking of? That's maybe the most shocking thing I've ever heard you say that you've done.
Probably.
This is great. I was kind of
when I was talking about the person in the gutter. Well, here's an that was a hypothetical.
Oh,
here's
man,
an
this
actual
blew
experience.
My mind. It's one of the first things I found out about Katie. She confessed to me early on.
So, but this was about being, when I talked about being heartless, really, about being judgmental of another person. And I was on the L in Chicago. I was when I was attending Northwestern University. And I was
molecular biology and biochem.
I can't remember. I may have been returning from, whatever. I was on the L. And this man came up to me, and he was actually walking through the car. It was fairly full that day, and he was passing out cards. And when he got to me, he gave me the card, and it had the different sign language, ways to sign the different letters of the alphabet. And then on the back side, it said, "I'm deaf. Please donate."
Was he selling pencils or not?
No.
Okay,
his card said, "I'm deaf.
Please help."
And I looked at it. And I looked at him in the eye and tore the card up. And my thinking at the moment was, you're just deaf. that you're fit, you're young. There's no reason you can't work. There's all sorts of things you could do if you really wanted to. You're using your deafness as an excuse. And I shouldn't have to help you. I'm working hard.
What kind of mood were
I'm
you
going
in
to
that day?
college. I was probably coming back from work. I was working to pay my way through college.
Partial scholarship.
And, a partial scholarship. My dad gave me a little bit of money, and I worked as a waitress like 4 days a week, and I had a very strong work ethic. And I was like, "Are there no jobs? Are there no workhouses? Where's that from? Are there no workhouses?"
They're not workhouses.
That's right, Eric Cartman. Okay, there was my Eric Cartman came out. But I mean, I did it. I looked him right in the eye and tore it up.
How did he react? Do you remember? You must remember.
He just moved on. I think he was shocked. I mean, I don't think he probably maybe had never seen anybody do that before. People probably put them away or turned away, but I doubt anyone ever tore the card up in front of him. And I felt fully justified at the time. I thought I was right. I thought I was,
Hitler thought he was right.
And
I'll bet Jack the Ripper thought he was right.
And that thing about telling that musician he should get up off his butt and go in and perform. I mean, I'm sure I thought I was helping him. I was giving him, tough love. Mm-hmm. That this was, somebody giving him a needed slap in the face. And, you shouldn't depend on charity. And,
might not even have been deaf. Maybe he was a con man.
Well, that's true. Yeah. How would I know?
You got to sneak up behind him and go, "Wah!"
But, as I as I've gotten older and I've gotten a lot, at least somewhat wiser and more compassionate, I am more conscious, I would say. I look back on that and appalled, really. I'm shocked that I could have been that heartless. That's the word I used for it, heartless. Because let's say he wasn't a con man. That I would have so little compassion for his struggle, for what it must be like. I can't even imagine what it would be like to not be able to hear, to have the difficulty in communication. And that I just,
or
because
at least,
I did
maybe
not.
At least you could have not did what you did. You could have said, factored all the stuff, and you're walking around an elevated railroad car,
train,
passing out.
Right, the humiliation of that, of asking strangers for help.
But you're doing that. I mean, why the hell don't you have a job? You are fit in all other ways. I mean, there must be something else you could do other than basically being bumming.
Mm-hmm. Begging.
Begging.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's the word for it, begging. That's what a street musician is doing. That's what I did. You're providing music.
Yeah.
But, so does an organ grinder and a monkey holding the cap out. I mean, it's like...
You could say that's more entertaining than some street musicians. I said some.
So, the idea is that what you did was just like quite a bit of an editorial.
It was. I
mean, because if you had communicated,
right?
Read my lips, or let's see, is there anything on the
piece
card
of
that means
paper.
this? I mean, that's kind of any sign for that, or do you understand this sign?
Right.
Which is what you did.
I mean, that was
not necessary. I think that's what you're trying to say.
Right.
I mean, who knows? You could, crunch
it was
numbers.
Cruel. It was cruel. It was
It
cruel.
was pretty far out. I remember being shocked.
Yeah.
Little did I know what was in store for me.
Because and that was definitely part of me. There was and there still is inside me a very cruel.
Cold.
I can be cold. I can be mean. Arthur calls it snappy.
She's cold, I'm hot. I express mine like Mount Vesuvius blowing its stack. And Katie just freezes you with a word.
But and that was me not accepting him the way he is. I did not see him. I saw only my prejudices about what somebody should be. And now if I see somebody like the ways I talked about him, the struggles of being deaf, most deaf people have trouble speaking. Most speaking people don't know sign language. We have, and way back then there was no the modern communications that have made life a lot easier for deaf people. And So, I overlooked all of that stuff. I did not accept him. As he was.
And that's what love is. Had you loved him, had
That's
you
right.
experienced acceptance for this is where this guy's at right now, you could have given him a smile and just said,
Right.
because I don't have time to engage with you on your life story, your path in life, your worldview, your values, the fact that you're in here soliciting on a streetcar, on a railroad train, which I think is surely against the rules of the L. It's against the law.
Right.
I'm not going to support you in this, but I don't have time. First of all, you can't hear. So perhaps this will get the message across to you. Then you throw the pieces in his face. You didn't do that.
No, I think I dropped them. I littered. I dropped them on the floor.
Which was also illegal. This rap is about a viewer who had questioned that surely love just isn't acceptance.
Right.
Yes, it is. That's what it is. I pick on romantic love because it's like one of the most appreciable shifts in consciousness that we experience. And I mean, Katie and I have been together for 30 years, and sometimes especially when I'm not actually around her, because when we're around each other, we're usually just working and doing stuff. But when I think about you abstractly, there's like the faint siren memory of the kind of love that I really feel for you still. It's in there.
Right.
That because of our amassed ridiculous history and cases on each other has been diminished down to, like a pilot light and a space heater compared to the raging conflagration. And that raging conflagration is really, ditto. I got you. I got you, kiddo. The idea is that we go through life fighting. Okay, we fight and we flight from reality right before us. What is? And all of a sudden, somebody comes into our space and they satisfy this extraordinary number of positive traits that we find acceptable. And that's what love is. On all sorts of levels. We got to go.
Thanks for watching, and hope you'll watch again.